Welcome to the Unfolding Thought Podcast. My name is Pratum. Today, I'm speaking with Courtney McAra, founder of Mustang MarTech and an expert in marketing operations. With deep experience in SaaS marketing, Courtney has helped teams tame wild databases, optimize marketing tech stacks, and turn messy systems into streamlined, scalable operations. In our conversation, we talk about the often overlooked discipline of marketing operations, why it's so critical to modern business, what makes it uniquely challenging, and how her methodology helps clients create clarity, accountability, and results. And now, I bring you Courtney McAra. Courtney, thank you for joining me. We talked about this just before we started recording, so before I ask you a question, I will state this for everyone here. You are, for the foreseeable future, the person that I've known the longest that I'm having on the podcast, and I don't know who else I will have. So I really appreciate you being here. I'm very excited. And with that preamble, would you mind telling me about yourself?
Sure. Hi, Eric. Thanks for having me. Thanks to all the listeners. Yeah, what a blast from the past. I think we met 18 years ago or something like that. And it is very surreal to be coming back now in my mid-40s and talking to somebody that I met ages and ages ago. So we met during an MBA program in beautiful Bellingham, Washington. It was a wonderful few years of my life. And after that, I kind of entered the workforce and lo and behold, ended up working in tech. I didn't really plan that. It's kind of just happened with the jobs that I got, and specifically in like the B2B sales and marketing side of tech. So I got a job at a very small startup that used Salesforce.com as their CRM. And I remember in the interview, actually in the job description, it said that Salesforce experience was required, which I had none. But I wrote in my cover letter that I would figure it out and I was a smart cookie and that I would learn it. And then here I am now, 15 years later, kind of still running on Salesforce, customizing things, integrating with Salesforce. And I'm now doing marketing operations consulting as an independent consultant.
Well, thank you. You said, I forget how you phrased it, but you said something about B2B sales and marketing or something along those lines. So at some point, were you doing things that might be characterized as sales enablement?
Yeah, a little bit. I would say the smaller the company, the, more hats that I have to manage and plates that I have to juggle. So I've definitely done some sales enablement, essentially working with the sales team so that they know, who am I supposed to be following up with? Who am I talking to? How do I talk about the product that we're selling? How do I, speak to their pain points that they might be having or talk about how our product is better than competitors? So I definitely have touched on that a little bit. The bigger companies that I've worked at and like the more mature the organization, then they usually have someone that specializes that. But in marketing ops, I actually like to say we're the team that has relationships with every other team in the organization. We obviously have a relationship with like the brand side of marketing and the website manager and then the sales team and then also the finance team and then the product team and the legal team. So marketing operations kind of has to talk to everybody.
And so explain then for me marketing operations as being distinct from some of these other groups.
Great question. Many people, including my family, would hear that I'm in marketing and they would talk to me about like magazine advertisements and logo and like what color green should this logo be? And that is not the type of marketing that I ended up in. It's not branding or even advertising. I am the database behind all the marketing. So you might have a very creative person trying to come up with an advertisement, whether it's a billboard or a commercial. But at the end of the day, once that's gone live, how do you analyze if that's been successful? Is there a return on your investment? Is there how many eyeballs have seen it? And have those eyeballs actually turned into revenue for your company? So that's kind of the high level view of marketing operations, is like all the data behind the scenes is like if the marketing team is asking for a $3 million budget from the CEO at the end of the year, the CEO is going to be like, okay, I gave you $3 million. What have you gotten in return? And usually it's the marketing operations team that is trying to help figure that out.
And you mentioned Salesforce. I think I have seen that you have experience with some other similar systems, but it sounds like some heavy Salesforce background. So are marketing operations people typically the Salesforce managers?
Not typically. We partner with usually the Salesforce administrator. That's usually their title. My software that I manage most often, and I think is probably the most powerful right now, is Marketo. Marketo was established, I think, in 2008 and then was acquired by Adobe in, I think, 2018 timeframe. So now it's an Adobe product in the Adobe suite of products, but Marketo integrates with Salesforce really, really well. It's like the peanut butter and jelly analogy. They just talk to each other. And, Salesforce is such a huge player and has so much market share that the majority of my clients and my work experience back when I was a full-time employee has been with a Marketo and Salesforce combination. But for other marketing operations people, HubSpot is another really big player. HubSpot can integrate with Salesforce, but also has its own CRM component. There are a ton of other marketing automation tools. There's Eloqua and Pardot, and the list can go on and on. ActiveCampaign, ActDot. I don't want to not list them all because I'm going to leave someone off the list, but just where my career took me and the companies that I ended up working at, it was really a lot of Salesforce and Marketo, and it's worked really well for kind of those Series A small companies that, might have a little bit of money up to really big enterprise companies. It seems to be a very common kind of suite of solutions.
With your experience, so my experience, I should say, with Salesforce is fairly limited, but I'm aware of the various products that they have purchased and then renamed. You mentioned Pardot, which I think is now Account Engagement or something like that.
I think there's that Salesforce Marketing Cloud.
Could be.
SFMC.
Yeah. Well, Marketing Cloud was ExactTarget.
ExactTarget. But ExactTarget acquired Pardot. And then Salesforce acquired ExactTarget. So I do think there are two different things now, but yes, they've acquired and renamed a lot of different tools over the years.
Yeah. With your experience with Salesforce or any other tools, you have a number of different software packages or providers that you may be managing or deeply involved with Marketo, for example, and yet you have to share data with Salesforce, or you have to develop lists, or you have to be able to track back to, I think you were saying, like, we spent X amount of dollars. What did it result in? So there's a lot of data integration or sharing and management of the database. How, as your career evolved, how did you either end up gravitating towards those kinds of roles, or maybe when did you recognize that this is what you wanted to do?
That's a really good question. It definitely was not a light bulb moment. It probably took months, if not years, because I was always in the marketing department. My first job after getting the MBA, I think my title was like marketing coordinator. I mean, I was like the gopher for the marketing department. I was, going to Kinko's and printing off flyers. And then I was kind of managing Salesforce and doing some sales enablement, a little bit of everything. But I was always in the marketing department. So there was always some aspect of like creativity or coming up with new ideas, or how do we pitch this product or position our software to be better than somebody else's. And I just found myself gravitating more towards the data, something that was black and white. And I was like, if there was an Excel spreadsheet that someone wanted me to analyze, I would raise my hand, because I would much rather than do that than work on, what should the tagline be on the homepage of the website, because that was so subjective. And I didn't like that gray area of like, well, the CFO likes the tagline, but the CTO doesn't like the tagline. And that just stressed me out to be so uncertain. So anything that was, I always liked math too. Even when I was back in school, I realized way too late that I should have been a math major. I loved business calculus, and I really struggled in some of the more subjective material. So I always know that 2 + 2 is always going to be 4. And if I could get that right, then I would feel much more confident in my job. So I think that's how I kind of ended up in the operations side of marketing. I liked the people in the marketing department. And I actually think back to school and I liked the people that were in all my marketing classes socially, but I did not relate to them on the creative side of things. I more wanted the like definitive answers.
It sounds to me like you and I are actually drawn to, or perhaps we're drawn to similar things, or we have maybe had similar feelings about some of our work experiences. So don't let me put words in your mouth. I will just tell you how I have often
Okay.
felt. So very often my title or role, whether it's been a full-time position or I've been consulting or whatever, it has been strategist. It could be digital strategist, marketing strategist, could be something strategist. And it has become very non-specific, very vague. And that's okay. But some of the frustrations, I guess, that I've had with a lot of other marketing strategists is that I am much more drawn to that spreadsheet. I am drawn much more to, well, we're going to do this thing, whether it's an exciting or necessarily highly creative thing. It could be an email. It could be a pop-up on a website. It could be a direct mail piece. If we're going to do the thing, how are we going to know that it worked? And then even if it didn't work, will we have some idea of what maybe we should do next based on that feedback or data that we got? And I have often found that a difference between me and some of the other strategists that I've been with is they're often much more creative than I am. And that's okay. It's good and bad for both of us, right? But because I'm so focused on like, well, is the tracking in place? And what does the data tell us? Then I end up looking at some of the more creative people who it's just a foreign language to them. And I feel like, while yes, I miss out on having just the completely original thought, maybe, that it also seems odd to me that you could propose an idea and you could spend the client's money, but then not have the ability to show them whether or not it worked. So again, I didn't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like maybe you've had some similar feelings.
Very much so. Oh my goodness. And I see these people that can present and pitch with such confidence on their creative ideas and really have no, data behind it, but they just believe in it so much. And I just am not that personality. I want to have the data behind. And as we're planning things, I'm also the type of person that wants to poke holes and like, well, what if this happens? What if this goes wrong? Is there a contingency plan? I imagine we're going to want to measure XYZ down the road. Or a lot of my clients and, companies I work for, we're small, kind of startup-y. And I would say, okay, we have a sales team right now of 3 people. And they're like, well, we'll just round robin. If we've got, new leads that come in from the website, we'll just round robin. I'm like, that's not going to last forever. Eventually, we're going to have, an America team, a team in EMEA, a team in APAC. We're going to have people in different languages. We're also going to be selling different products. Are we going to have each salesperson going to be really, really advanced knowledge on all of these different products, especially if we acquire companies, or are people going to specialize? So I am always like trying to pre-plan, like putting gaps within the processes, because someone's going to come along someday and be like, in between step 1 and step 2, I need to add like 6 or 7 more things. So that's why operations has just always appealed to me. And actually my like side story is my family has always teased me. I wanted to pack the car for the summer road trip vacations and like reorganize the refrigerator. I'm like, oh no, if you put this on this side and you put the bread over here and the milk over here, like making all those things fit together just like works for my brain.
Well, one, I love several things that you said. And 2, I'm going to guess that there have been at least a few people in your career that are those highly creative people. But when you two have been able to find a way to work together, then you've probably really valued that highly creative person who maybe is incapable. I have worked with people, they're just incapable of working a spreadsheet, for example, or looking at Google Analytics, and
Yeah.
they can go through a how-to and still they will not understand what, what the training that they've gone through. And I'm overgeneralizing here, but
Yeah, I think it's either gone really, really well with someone or gone really poorly. Some people are just, this one boss that I had years ago and who was a great guy, loved by the team, but his whiteboard was such a mess because he would draw arrows and diagrams and then the data is going to go over here. And I took the whiteboard way too literally and I kept looking at it and it would be diagrams on top of diagrams. I mean, it would be dirty for weeks and weeks. And it gave me anxiety looking at how messy it was. And if I was to whiteboard something, it would be like very clean lines and nice handwriting and, very much more literal. So sometimes it could mesh together really well with someone and sometimes it could be oil and water.
well, so you've been running your own business for quite a while, and you work in marketing operations. So what kind of organizations do you work with, and what sort of engagement do you tend to have with existing marketing or salespeople or Salesforce administrators or anyone else at those clients?
Yeah, so I started my little business called Mustang MarTech in 2019. And kind of the reason I started it is because I had been at my last employer for about 4 years, which was a great experience and a long tenure. And they had really grown and they had actually IPO'd. Shortly after they IPO'd, it's a different business now. It's publicly traded. You've got quarterly releases. And so there was a change in some leadership. The CMO had changed. And I liked the new team. It wasn't anything of like, oh, these people are bad by any means. It just, I think, was time. It had been 4 years and I had kind of cleaned up the Marketo instance to kind of work on its engine. And I was looking for a new opportunity. So I did a lot of kind of coffee dates and informational interviews with people because I never really wanted to say, oh, I'm actually applying yet. And all these conversations I kept having, the job was already the job that I was doing. It was a very similar job description, title, compensation, all that. And I said, well, why would I leave this great company with this, it's a very stable company now and it's gone public and, a great brand recognition and logo. Like, why would I leave for the risk of something else? And I ended up having a coffee date with a friend. It was someone who I had worked with before when I had worked at Marketo at their HQ and they were still pre-IPO public company and a public company. She said, well, I wish I could hire you, but we can't afford you. And not that I was, making some crazy salary, but it was more like they just didn't have headcount. They just had a couple demand gen people, a couple salespeople, and they were migrating from one marketing automation system onto Marketo. And said, I wish we could just have you as like a mentor for my team, for my junior people. They've never done Marketo before, and I think they're going to be great, but I just wish we could have your brain for 5 or 10 hours a week. And I was like, maybe we can work something out. Like, I don't know, let's try it. So, time to quit my job. I decided I didn't want to do moonlighting. I didn't want to do nights and weekends because I knew her team was not going to be working nights and weekends. And I never felt comfortable trying to juggle client work while this was, back in, again, 2019, I was still in office and, working my day job. So I decided to quit. So most of my clients are in this tech world of using Salesforce and some sort of marketing automation system. They have a demand gen team supporting some either ADRs or BDRs on the sales side that are going to process leads and introduce them to the account executives. From Series A all the way up to big enterprise companies.
In the work that you do you have clients that you work on implementations of Marketo or other systems?
Yeah, so I do this migration thing, like I mentioned for the first client. They were migrating from one system to another and needed help kind of moving the data over. So that's like a brand new instance. Or someone who has never had a marketing automation system at all. I also do a lot of parental leave coverage. That was actually something that I thought was a gap in the market. So when I was in my last role, we had a team about 3 people doing marketing operations, and one gentleman, his wife was pregnant and he had his parental leave. Well, they had a very good parental leave coverage at this company, and so he would take off 6 weeks, but then he would come back to work for like a month. And then he would take off 6 weeks and go back to work for a month because he knew about like sleep regressions with the kids and he was trying to time when his leave was. And it was really hard for me to find coverage while he was out that would be that flexible. There was obviously agencies that we could have hired, but agencies didn't want this like on again, off again. Or they were asking me if I wanted to hire a really junior person or a really expensive senior person. So I kind of had this epiphany when I was on my own of like, oh, I can cover maternity leave, either maternity or paternity leave for people. And I could do 6 weeks on and 4 weeks off. That sounds great. So I will come in and kind of, help out a team while they're in the middle of a gap. Sometimes it's a parental leave. Sometimes it's a sabbatical. Or if someone's left the job and, they've given their 2 weeks notice, but it's going to take them 3 or 4 months to backfill for that role because the interview process is really long. And I can come in, the next week and kind of just help out, keep the lights on while they're going through a transitional phase.
So you mentioned some of the things that you provide, and I think the realization that you had or the opportunity that it sounds like you first recognized was providing some oversight, coaching, mentorship for a team during that transition, during that migration. Do you still generally provide, coaching or senior level input as opposed to, just coming in and filling a need when they have a gap, executing?
Yeah, I think there is more of the senior level. I guess I hesitate to use the word senior because it sounds so mature, but it's just the best practices. I hear a lot of these whispers on calls of like, how have your other clients done this? How do other people manage like GDPR compliance? How do other people do lead scoring? If we have acquired another business and they have their own instance of, Salesforce and Marketo or HubSpot or any other tools, how do we do this? How have you seen this before? So I definitely like to share the knowledge that I've seen and what I've witnessed in the past. And I also feel like I can just do things a lot faster. I have like some templates of how I like to do lead scoring, again, consent compliance, a preference center. And I say, well, we don't have to start with a blank piece of paper. Like I have done this before. Here's like a skeleton framework. Does this make sense for your company? How big is your sales team? How many products are you selling? How big is your database? I mean, I have one client right now whose database is only like 75,000 records, which is actually quite small. Most of my clients are closer to 1 million records or sometimes 3 million records. So all of those different sizes of clients have different needs and requests. And I luckily, had a little bit of experience with all of them. So I try to give more kind of guidance and oversight of what I've seen in the past. And my favorite is actually when like the student becomes the teacher and there are some people that you meet and it's like you give them the keys to the castle. They get into Marketo and all of a sudden they're trying to do API calls and hook up to CDPs and do all this stuff. And I was like, yes, the person has like, they've learned it all. They've seen the light at the end of the tunnel and then they can start teaching me how to do stuff.
That's awesome. And you said you largely work with B2B SaaS companies? Is that right?
Yes. Yep. It's generally software companies selling their technology to other software companies. Sometimes there's like a B2B2C approach where there are some general users, but usually the software that they're selling is so expensive, $30,000 to $75,000 a year, up to even $1 million a year, that it's someone in their job has realized, oh, I can't do this I need either accounting software or one was like architectural design software in the cloud and security software, that kind of thing. So they're selling it. Someone in their job has realized, I need this. I'm going to go out and find the expert in it and then have to go through the whole sales cycle and go through contracts and red lines and try and buy what it is that they are looking for. And going to trade shows too. If you've been to trade shows, I think are very interesting. I remember my first trade show I went to was actually an orthodontic show. The AAO, the American Association of Orthodontics, the company I worked for at the time, was specialized in websites for dentists and orthodontists because they would integrate with the practice management software that a dentist or an orthodontist would use. So appointment setting and collecting bills, but also like Invisalign tracking. So we went to this orthodontist conference and there's booths where people are like selling the chairs that dentists use, or like the little scrapey tools or the lights that are overhead. And then we had our booth that was like, we do SEO and SEM for dentists and orthodontists. And half of them were like, what's SEO? We don't even know what this is. So
I know exactly what you mean. How are things changing in marketing operations, whether you talk about AI or other changes in technology? Is this a space where there have been big changes already, or that you see things on the horizon?
huge changes. There's so much technology out there that is just wild to see what is coming through the pipeline. There is a gentleman named Scott Brinker who has done this MarTech landscape, calls himself Chief MarTech for marketing technology. And I think he did his first one probably around 2010 or so. And he put them kind of into categories of like technology that's good for CRMs and technology good for marketing and some that's good for scoring or predictive things. And it went from, a couple hundred companies to now it's like over 10,000 companies out there have marketing technology solutions. It's wild. AI is definitely being talked about. There are conversations whether people think it's working or not working, but there are agents and bots that can now create newsletters and campaigns for you that you can just, type in a couple sentences of send a newsletter to everyone in my database, telling them about all the great things we have coming up over the next couple of months. So nothing has completely taken over yet. I still think there's a lot of like quality control and quality assurance steps that I think we need to have human eyeballs on, but it's definitely making things a lot faster. To be able to like clone and repeat, builds that we used to have humans do all the time. Like webinars are a very common thing that we do in this space. Once a month, you're trying to get a guest speaker to come in, but to set up the actual technology piece of like the webinar has to be scheduled and the invitations have to go out and the reminders. And does everyone have the correct link in there if they're on a Google Calendar or an Outlook calendar? So we're getting to this space now where you can just have a brief about what your webinar is going to be about and when it is, and it should be able to build the whole thing for you. So I think we're very close to that becoming reality.
Within or specific to AI, I suppose, or I don't even know if I'm necessarily terming things correctly if I call it AI. Let's just say automation.
Okay.
or intelligence. Are some of these capabilities things that you are taking advantage of that are built into, for example, a Marketo already? Or are you seeing that some of these automations or intelligence are tools that bolt on to the bigger technologies that you're currently using?
Adobe, who obviously now owns Marketo, is doing some things with AI. I just went to their annual conference in March in Las Vegas, the Adobe Summit, and they are showcasing some really cool things. They have so many different solutions. They definitely have graphics and video, things that are AI. Going down into like Marketo specifically, I think right now it's integrations and things that are bolted on, but I think it's in the very near future getting to be although, now that you said, is it automation? Is it AI? There was one cool thing that they showed where you could have like a sketch of what you would like an email template to look like literally like back of the napkin kind of sketch, and take a picture of it and upload it, and it would create your email template in HTML code from an image. I'm like, that's pretty cool. That to me feels like AI-ish. So yeah, it's getting there, but right now it is still bolting on. I know people are using, OpenAI and ChatGPT and then pushing data into Clay. And then from Clay, it goes into their marketing automation software or to CDP. So right now it's still kind of piecemeal, but I think Adobe has got their eye right on the prize as well.
Yeah, I cannot speak to Marketo, but for some of Adobe's AI, whether it's highly complex or not, you can do, for anyone that is familiar with podcast editing and all that, one of the big tools right now is called Descript. And podcasters love Descript because you can do text-based editing. But you can do text-based editing right here. We are recording in a platform called Zencaster. You can do that in Riverside, which is one of the big platforms. I edit in Adobe Premiere Pro, and you can do that in Premiere Pro. And that's something that is very basic. But then there are tools that integrate into Premiere Pro, like Autopod's multicam editor, which I will use, and it will cut back and forth between us based on when we're talking and how long it's been since I have said something. It'll cut back to me for a second and show me while you're talking and whatever. And I noticed maybe a month ago, which will probably be 3 to 4 months by the time this is finally published, that within Premiere Pro, you can extend audio and video by, I think it's 2 seconds or so. And so I could, if one of us gets cut off in what we're saying, I can basically just drag the audio and it will sort of estimate what was the word you were saying. And then it will try to replicate your voice, and it will do a similar thing with video. And so it sure seems to me that we have a common, the big players trying to integrate everything, which makes a lot of sense. I'm guessing that with Marketo or with Salesforce, that you're always getting pushed, right, to integrate these new features, and yet you have an existing code base and you have a lot of change management and UI issues. You have to go through data issues. But with Marketo or with marketing operations, generally, it's just a space that I'm not familiar with. Like, how are the big players handling things versus being pushed heavily by AI startups,
Yeah, I mean, I definitely know that there is an appetite for it out there. I mean, marketing operation teams can be really big. There's already been a shift of actually outsourcing a lot of marketing operations to outside the US, whether there's Central America. I think it was like Costa Rica has a bunch. There was a bunch in Ukraine. There's always a bunch in India. So getting those resources in other places. And then there's time zone difficulties of, someone's working at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night when it's, 9 o'clock on a Monday on the East Coast. So then getting into AI, I think they're hoping to streamline some of that. Obviously, they want to cut costs for the marketing department to, cut overhead. So the goal, I think, is to get to a place where, you can run your entire marketing department with just one person and an agent and a chatbot. But I think it's going to be a ways. I mean, just looking at how long it took all of the marketing automation platforms that we are familiar with today to get to their maturity point. I mean, like I said, Marketo started, I think, in 2007 or 8. I started using it in 2010. And I remember what the tool looked like then and they're still adding to it and improving it. And there's still features that, we're building and making them better and stronger. So it's going to take a few years to get to that point.
Yeah, I agree with you. And there are certainly unique aspects of whatever change we go through in a new technology or new media or something. And yet at the same time, it helps to look back at, well, how quickly did the change come? I was talking to someone recently on the podcast, and they said that when they were about 16 years old, all they wanted to do was drive. They just wanted to get their license. But what people were talking about at the time was, when are we going to have flying cars? No, he felt like no one was talking about just how cool it is to be able to drive. It's like, all I want to do is drive. And I forget what it was that his father said to him, but one of the things that he said is, now we're 20, 30 years later, we still don't have flying cars.
Yeah.
But that's all people wanted to talk about at the time.
Yeah.
And he was sort of illustrating that, well, yes, that may be a different thing and there are different considerations. Often things don't change as quickly as you think they're going to change.
Right. And maybe let's focus on the skill sets that we can use right now, rather than, there's always hedging the bets of like, what should we be preparing for? But thinking that like those autonomous cars are going to take over and no one's going to be driving or know how to drive. Sure, maybe a couple generations after us, but yeah, we're still driving. I also still just enjoy driving for fun. Like, I want to go and ride like ATVs around in the forest or something. So I think that, some of those skill sets can just be really interesting. I did want to talk about AI for a different department, actually, for the sales side, because I do know that that's come up. And even though it's not marketing operations, we touch that team. We work with that team so much. A lot of the data that we're trying to collect from either trade shows or website visitors, we're showing to, BDRs, the business development reps or sales development reps. And they have heard of a shift towards, eliminating that role and just using agents and AI for that to go through and vet all your inquiries to see who is actually a prospective buyer, which I think is interesting. I guess I'm hesitating because I don't know exactly how I feel. I always feel a little guilty about getting rid of a role or a job because I feel like employment is such an important thing. But if you're taking the emotions away from it, is AI actually better? Is it cheaper? Is it faster? And how does it work for the end user? If you think like I'm Sally and I work for this big company and I have this really hard job that I'm trying to do and I want to go and buy this really expensive $75,000 piece of software. If I go to the website and I say I want to talk to someone about pricing, what's the best process for Sally, right? Is she want to work with an AI bot or do a questionnaire and then get some sort of procurement document or RFP that for something, or does she want to talk to a human? And I don't know if we have the answer to that yet. Some people don't want to talk to humans at all. I mean, no one even answers their phone anymore. Everyone just texts. So,
you're reminding me of, I was just having this conversation with my father, who is a doctor, and something came up about the future of healthcare. And he was saying it's really not going to be that long before he believes that there will be robots of some sort that will be doing surgery.
Oh my gosh. Wait, I was nodding and thinking like, yeah, they're going to be ones taking your blood pressure and, taking your temperature as you come in. But you went to surgery. That's how he thinks we're close to that.
Well, so they have robots, like one of the big robots right now that is, I don't even know if robot is the right term, but is the Da Vinci robot, I think is sort of the colloquial name. Da Vinci is maybe the company I will include it in the show notes so that we can be specific. But Da Vinci has been around for a while, and there's sort of new iterations that get approved every few years from one manufacturer or another. And my neighbor actually is a specialist in robotics surgery, robotic surgery. And he will describe that, you manipulate the machine, and then the machine is what is actually sort of touching and manipulating the person. And my father was basically saying, well, how long until you don't even need the doctor to do anything? You've heard probably of the remote surgeries that have been tested out where there's a surgeon of some sort that is in New York and the surgery is occurring in Los Angeles. And I don't know how often this has happened, but it has happened. And what I was saying to him, because around the time we were also talking about family members who have had dementia. And, when somebody gets pretty deep into dementia, they often will, anything that you do that is out of the ordinary will make a lot of these folks uncomfortable. So you go to visit them at their care facility and you say, hey, we're going to go out to dinner. And you get about halfway to the car and some folks get really worried, and I was posing to my father because I've worked quite a bit with healthcare providers, pharmacy, healthcare logistics organizations, home healthcare organizations all around healthcare. I was saying, it sure seems to me like while there will be improvements in surgery, that what I think we're going to be more likely to see is a home care robot that those people who have dementia become a lot more comfortable with. I presented this at a conference recently. I posed, what if Amazon gives you Alexa, the cat, and Alexa is, can change bandages, has defibrillator pause.
Yeah, it can like check your oxygen level. Yeah. Check to see if your heart rate is, spiking. Make sure you're taking your medication.
and you become comfortable, and Alexa can talk back to you. So that becomes your friend, and, but can also take care of you. Well, at the same time that you maybe have this, I'm guessing that Alexa is not going to do surgery on you at your home. That seems a ways off, if ever. At the same time that you have this, by 2035, we will have tens of thousands of unfilled general practitioner positions in the United States. There will be more people 65 plus than there will be 18 and under. And the fastest growing demographic will be people 85 plus. And a lot of these people will live in rural settings where you can't even get someone to move to do healthcare. So coming back around to what you were saying about some of these sales roles or sales facilitation roles and business development tasks that need to be done, it sure seems to me like the Alexa, the robot cat aside, that there will be a need to have AI facilitating or potentially even completely taking over prescriptions, automated insurance approvals, predicting that, hey, you have a 60% chance of having some sort of heart cardiovascular event in the next 60 days, and a human won't be involved at all until such time as it's something that kind of only a human can do. And so then, when you get into sales or business development, there are AIs that do a very good job of mimicking humans, but there'll probably be some things where, like, you walk into a showroom or you go to that trade show, and that's when the human takes over. But the AI can do everything else to sort of like provide the oil in the gears up until then to keep the machine moving.
Yeah. Man, I don't know how I feel about the age where I'm at in where society is at right now. Like, I feel just a little bit on the too old side to be really comfortable with it. I'm a little bit of like a laggard, or I'm, a little bit hesitant to go all the way or to see my future. And I'm like, at what age am I going to be, in 2035 when all this is happening? Like, how out of touch am I going to be I don't have children, so I can't say I'll be the grandma, but I'll be like the old Aunt Courtney who's calling to my nieces and nephews going, I don't know how to turn on the television.
Well, with some changes in technology and the fact that you have been through migrations and implementations, and, there are people, whether they're in marketing operations already or someone is in college right now, they will be in college soon. There are a lot of lessons from the past that we can learn. Yes, things change. But as you look forward into the future, based on the missteps you have seen with organizations, when they go through migrations, when they manage their marketing databases, what are some of the common mistakes that you see? And I guess either what would be your advice for your clients, people working in marketing automation, or do you see solutions coming, like an AI solution would fix this mistake? It'll never be an issue again.
I think one of the biggest mistakes is really overcomplicating things. I think that's a lot of what I try to advise people on. Is they always want to say there's a random use case for, this prospect because I met this prospect at this dinner, or my next door neighbor's ex-wife's brother is the CEO at this company and they need to be treated a certain way, and try to build solutions. And really, I'm thinking about like the life cycle of a prospect through the very first time they hear about their company and they meet you, all the way to having a closed one opportunity to try and keep it, as general and simple as possible. And kind of going back full circle to what I said at the beginning, that marketing ops department, you've got to get out of your shell of only talking to other marketing ops or just thinking yourself as like you're supporting marketing or supporting demand gen. You really are supporting the entire business. And I really just advocate for, I think the marketing ops people out there are like the future CEOs. They see the entire organization, again, from acquiring a new name all the way through to an opportunity being won. And then what happens after they become a customer? We still want to continue to market to them. We need to make sure they get onboarded. And it does get a little bit harder now that everyone's working from home or working remote. We're just, online doing emails and video conferencing and instant messengers with each other. But sometimes I'll just go to a client and say, I need to talk to your legal team. Who's your chief of legal? And they'll give me a name, and I'm just randomly on, Slack or Teams introducing myself. And they're like, I've never met anyone in marketing operations before, but they need to be involved. So that would be, I think, my 2 pieces of advice, to keep it simple and to introduce yourself to everybody in the company, because at some point you're going to need a favor from them, or they're going to need a favor from you.
I don't want to lean too heavily into a currently popular stereotype, but I think it's important to ask, do you think that either with culture change, generational change, and or people working remotely more and more, that it gets harder for people that you work with or people generally to take that step of reaching out and introducing themselves to someone in another department that they've never talked to?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's harder for some, almost like my age and a little bit older. Like I said, I feel like I'm at the youngest side of those people that were so used to being in the office and that, might not feel comfortable just doing it. It's like cold calling, but over Slack, just that's a little bit awkward. But I do feel like the younger generation and people that I've met, I've done some mentorship through like highway education and people that are really focusing on trying to get the next generation to learn marketing, automation, and operations. I feel like they have no fear. And they're like, yeah, they won't pick up the phone to call somebody, but they'll send an email, they'll send a message. And they're comfortable with kind of the digital introduction. So I think it's a little bit of both.
I'm glad to hear that, because it's really easy to simplify whatever it is that we encounter down to, well, this must be the explanation, right? You encounter this in discussions about diversity, right? I look at you and I just put you in 1 or 2 categories. And yes, you fit in simple categories, sure, but the uniqueness of you comes up in the fact that you are in multiple categories. That's just one way in which we're all diverse or unique or whatever. And so it's really easy to simplify things down to everything is worse today because no one will talk to one another. But just because they're not talking to one another doesn't mean that they're not communicating. And the changes come with positives and negatives, of course. But if I don't spend a little bit more time thinking about it, then I might very well just miss out on the reality of the situation, which it sounds to me like I might portray my question as, or imply in my question, that communication is just getting worse. And you're kind of saying, not really, it's just different.
Yeah, I think it's just different. And I think one great thing that is happening in culture and society now, this next generation, is I think people are a little bit more like self-aware over their own preferences and behaviors. And some people are like, I love working from home. I'm happier, I'm more productive, I'm a better coworker. And some people are realizing I don't like it. And I think college kids are even realizing this. And I think it's becoming a lot more normal to find the way that you thrive, and even working hours, the people that want to work really early in the morning and wake up, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and some people are the night owls. And I think that's a little bit more okay, and finding people that, find their own strengths, where before it was, you got to be in an office and there's going to be all hands on Mondays at 8:30 in the morning and you better be there, or, shame on you. And I think the next generation, along with mental health and all that, I think it all ties together of like, what is, spurring anxiety in you or depression or whatever, and how can you make your life, including the working part of your life, but your entire life, work for yourself.
I want to come back around a little bit to your company, because I think at least 2 points, it sounded to me like you were hinting at a bit of a methodology. And I think I have seen it either in your LinkedIn posts or maybe on your website. So your business is called Mustang MarTech. And I think I have seen that you have a Mustang methodology. And it kind of sounded to me like whether this is robust or not, or it's just general, it sounded to me earlier, you're talking about, I try to plan in gaps because somebody's going to come along and they want to add 6 or 7 steps. And there was something else as well that you said. What I was wondering is, do you have sort of like core principles about either the Mustang methodology or just generally about marketing automation that you feel like these are the things that we need to uphold or the way to work, something of that nature?
It was not that seriously planned out. I just like the alliteration of the double M. And I think it's just been kind of my best practices, things that I thought I could put out there in the world as a swipe file for someone else to come along and copy and paste and say, I don't really want to, use my brain too hard to figure out how to do consent tracking for, the UK and the EU and Canada and Germany and all that stuff. So it's kind of, this is my method and how I do things. And I'm also completely open to being proven wrong and that my methodology needs to be upgraded for 2025. So yeah, it's just kind of my thoughts and best practices on how I have done things in the past and how I've seen them be successful.
Okay. And so you have your website. I see you share things on LinkedIn about being involved in sometimes speaking at conferences, but even I think if you're not necessarily speaking, you seem to attend a decent amount of things. You mentioned, I think it was Adobe's summit. So is there, with being involved in the community, if I can call it that, is that a common thing in marketing operations? Are there a lot of marketing ops people that are active in a community? And if not, I suspect you're going to tell me that people should be more active in their industry communities.
Yeah, there definitely is a community. I can't say it is large because numbers are so subjective, but there's a couple hundred of us that actually, I feel like we've known each other now for a decade and have grown up together. And, my foundation really is in Marketo because I started using it so long ago. And Marketo had such a wonderful customer marketing team and initiative. It wasn't just customer marketing of like, hey, your renewal's up, you're going to renew your contract. They did a roadshow every year to tell us about the new products that would come out. They encouraged everyone in their geographic regions to get together. So in Seattle, I got to meet all the other Seattle Marketo customers. And so if I got stuck with something or I didn't know how something worked, we would, have each other's email addresses. And again, this is back before really everyone was on Slack. You really knew how to get a hold of other people. And then we would go to Marketo's annual conference and they would get us again all together. And they did a thing called the Champions Program. So you could submit a story about how you used Marketo in your job, how you used it either to, to get a raise, improve your boss, whatever you did that impacted your business. And you would submit your story and then they would pick a bunch of winners in different categories of like the, champion marketer of the year, biggest impact. And getting selected as a champion is, a great honor. And then you got, either a badge on your lanyard or you got invited to a special webinar. So I'd been a champion a couple of times and you just started running into these champions all the time. And you'd go to lunch, be like, wait, you're a Marketo champion from class of 2012 or you're from class of 2013. And that has just carried on now, even though it's Adobe, they still have a champion program. And I think even beyond that world, even to like HubSpot, there's Inflection, there's Eloqua. I think just the concept of being an advocate for not just for your software, but for your career and for the type of work that you do in the business as a whole, and like to advocate for marketing ops and that, we can be viewed as overhead because if you're not in sales, then you're a cost center. But what's the value of having a marketing operations? So there's a great community now, marketingops.com. And they actually went and bought this very expensive URL. So it's very easy to find. They now do a conference every year that is platform agnostic. So they are their own organization. They are not funded by Adobe. So they're not sitting there pushing it to you all the time. But I have gone to, I think 3 of their conferences before they even launched. They did a little summer camp in Seattle with 20 or 30 people to kind of test out the market. And it's been great. And I think the last couple of years, there's been about 400 or 500 people that come to They call it Mopsapalooza, which is in Anaheim in the fall. And it's a great community. And, they obviously have vendors there to help pay for the conference, but you're surrounded by people that know what you do for a living, have the same challenges that you do, either trying to get more budget or headcount and deal with the software changes, dealing with AI. So if anyone is listening to this and you have not been to Mopsapalooza, come this year. It'll be in Anaheim in October.
I will link to that in the show notes. And if I can build upon or support some of what you're saying, I mean, I am more of an extrovert for sure than, being an introvert. And I understand there are plenty of people who have social anxiety, or it drains them to be around people they don't know, or whatever the specifics are of your situation. So I don't want to ignore that. However, to hopefully support some of this, I think that there are so many investments that you can make that will pay off later when you can go to a lunch, a user group lunch, for example, or a morning, local, it could be marketing operations, networking event, or happy hour, whatever it is, or it could be just general digital marketing, whatever it is that's appropriate for you.
Yep.
And do you want to get up early in the morning and go do this thing and have to delay some meetings, for example? Probably not. I don't like to, but the thing is that if you can go and do something and not have to be in a position where you're asking people for something, then you can put hopefully a relatively small investment into building a relationship or being networked in a community. And it might be next year, or it might be 5 or 6 years from now, where you could be looking for a job, or you may just find that you have some friends that you wouldn't have had before. And now you go through a hard point in your life. And, people nowadays, right? Like there aren't a lot of people who go and play pickup soccer when they are adults, right? Because they're busy with work or kids or whatever. And it's so much easier when I can just flip on Netflix, or when I can have DoorDash deliver my food, or I don't have to go to Starbucks or the local coffee shop because I have an espresso machine on my counter. And not that I think you were saying exactly this, but, just to wrap it up or to restate, I feel like a big piece of what sticks out to me in what you were saying is that making that small investment, putting forth that small effort when you don't need something, can really be a huge benefit later on, especially in times like these where we certainly have a lot of uncertainty. And if you aren't dealing with the change right now, I suspect many of us will be dealing with substantial changes in how we do our work, who is working versus the AI working next year, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. And now would be a good time to, as the phrase goes, if you didn't plant the tree, the best time to plant the tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today. Plant the tree today. Go out to Mopsapalooza.
Yep, absolutely. No, you're totally right. And I think getting some face-to-face time is really important. And I encourage the introverts and the extroverts to come. I think I like the Adobe conference, but it's obviously about a specific suite of solutions. The reason I really get behind Mopsapalooza is that it is so focused on our niche that, you're standing in line to get lunch, and the person that you're talking to, you don't have to explain what Marketo is. You don't have to explain what HubSpot is, or, what PPC is. Everyone already kind of knows what you do. So you can really get down to like the problem that you're having. Is it, that you're dealing with an ICP formula, or you're trying to figure out a segmentation, or, you're trying to customize, you want to have like graphics in your emails or something like that. Like the introduction part of the conversation, like there's very little small talk because you can just get right into the weeds of it. So I think it's great. And I personally even have made friends. Again, you just kind of hit it off with certain people that during, again, hard times in my life, I obviously have been consulting and kind of independent. And with parents getting sick over the last couple of years, I've been able to pass off clients to other people and just be like, you know what, I mentally am at my capacity right now. Can you help me out and, work on this client for me? And it's been great. So
That's awesome.
I think the face-to-face part is still pretty important. And I think that's actually even carrying over outside of marketing operations. I think just the concept of trade shows in general, we were so closed down after COVID, and then it kind of, I think, lingered. A lot of people were like, well, it's easy to stay home, but I think we're going to kind of see a resurgence of the value of face-to-face because it is going to be more rare and it's going to make it more special.
Yeah, I think this is an area where there are things that are different, but it's not necessarily lost. The deep human need for connection and the unique things that you can get out of being together physically. Is it different from 5 years ago, from 15 years ago? Plenty of things are different, but there's a deep human need for being valued, feeling productive, being part of a community, and so on.
Yeah. I even have had not very often, but I've had 2 clients probably in the last 12 to 18 months want to do an in-person like whiteboard sharing session, and it's a lot of travel to get we got someone from Denver and someone from Washington, D.C., and I'm in Portland, Oregon, and to get us all to go to a room to physically be together to literally draw on a whiteboard for 5 or 6 hours, it seems like a lot, but it makes a big difference just to get the juices flowing. And again, you can interrupt someone. It just seems a little more natural to interrupt in person than you are on camera. So I think it is important. So maybe we'll see each other again at some point, Eric. It has been far, far, far too long.
It has been quite a while, yes. Well, speaking of connection, people don't have to fly to Portland, Oregon to connect with you or follow you or whatever. You have your website, which I will link to. Do you recommend that people connect with you on LinkedIn, sign up for an email newsletter? What is it where do you send people?
LinkedIn is great. That's probably where I'm the most active. My website, Mustang MarTech, is great as well. If you were trying to get a hold of me, I have collected those email addresses, but I will say as a marketing operations person and essentially an email master, I do not have an email newsletter. I have not done a blast because I think people are emailed enough as it is. I feel like it is my job to make sure the emails that you get are the ones that you really, really want and not me just spamming you. So yeah, find me on LinkedIn. I would be happy to chat. And again, I will be at Mopsapalooza in October. HubSpot is having their conference actually in San Francisco this year, which I'm actually thinking of attending. They're normally in Boston, but they're doing it on the West Coast for once. So I might be attending that one. And I'm always open to hear about other conferences and events, and especially if they're in cool locations. I will do one more plug for Mopsapalooza. The day after the conference, it is open invitation for anyone who wants to go to Disneyland together. And so it's very fun to go and ride around on a roller coaster with a bunch of people that you know from your professional life. So I highly recommend that as well.
Well, I have not attended Mopsapalooza, but having been to a ton of conferences in my career, I can definitely say that just about every time I've gone and done the extra activity, that it has been well worth the extra expense of being there for an extra day or paying the tour fee or whatever. And, it doesn't matter that you're an adult. Disneyland's pretty cool.
It is cool. It is very cool. And we all end up talking about work anyway. It's, that's what we have in common. Sure, you get to know about people's personal lives and their families and stuff like that. But, we all are there, they're living and eating and breathing work. You're going to end up having something in common and solving some solution that you're like, oh, you know how to do the JavaScript code for that token? This is amazing. Give me your email address.
Nice. Well, Courtney, I appreciate you being here. As I said, I was really excited to be able to talk to someone that I've known for so long. And I also see you post, and I think that, the impression that I have is you really know your space and your work very well. And you've confirmed that in ways that I really value, like being very structured and disciplined and all that. So you delivered upon my excitement. So thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was very surreal. Never planned to be an entrepreneur or an independent or consultant. And I will say I feel very proud of it. So I appreciate the compliment.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Courtney. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you for listening. I hope you got a lot out of today's conversation. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. And please share it with someone you know who'd appreciate this kind of information. If you want to bring this kind of thinking to your own business, check out mine at inboundandagile.com. We specialize in helping leaders with challenges around marketing, communications, and leadership so they can inspire real action in their people and audiences. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you'll come back for future episodes.